Black woman forced to wash dishes at luxury party, unaware that his wife owned the mansion. You shouldn't even be here, whispered Victoria Hartwell, organizer of Manhattan's most exclusive charity gala, pushing Camila toward the mansion's kitchen. Someone like you can only serve at this kind of event, not attend it. Camila Williams, 31, held the crystal tray steady as she felt dozens of curious eyes on her. She was the only black person in the main hall, surrounded by businesspeople, socialites, and politicians sipping champagne that cost $1,000 a bottle. What none of them knew was that the woman who had just been publicly humiliated had a secret that would turn that night into a collective nightmare. Sorry for the confusion, Camila murmured with a calmness that intrigued some of those present. I just came to deliver this to his, but Victoria interrupted her with a sharp gesture. We don't have time for stories. The kitchen is overwhelmed and you're going to help wash the dishes. Now. The room fell into an awkward silence. Some guests lowered their eyes, others whispered among themselves, but no one dared to question the hostess's decision. After all, Victoria Hartwell had been organizing the most prestigious events in New York high society for 2 decades. Camila took a deep breath, remembering something his wife had said that morning. Sometimes people reveal who they really are when they think no one important is watching. At the time, she hadn't fully understood the comment, but now it made perfect sense. 3 hours earlier, she had arrived at the main entrance of the mansion, wearing an elegant navy blue dress. The security guard at the door looked her up and down and pointed to the back of the building. The service entrance is that way, he said without even asking his name or checking the guest list. Camila smiled diplomatically. Actually, I should be on the main list. I'm sure you are, he laughed sarcastically. They all say that. Now, in the kitchen filled with steam and the noise of dishes being washed, Camila rolled up her sleeves and began the work that had been assigned to her. Around him, other employees, all black or Latino, worked in silence, accustomed to this kind of treatment. Don't worry, whispered Maria, a woman who had been drying glasses for 20 years at events like this. People like him have always been like this. He thinks we're invisible. Camila nodded, but his eyes shone with an intensity that the experienced Maria couldn't decipher. There was something different about this woman, a quiet confidence that didn't fit the situation. As she polished a silver platter, Camila listened to the laughter coming from the main hall. Victoria Hartwell was telling a group how she had put an intruder in his place, eliciting approving laughter. The comment reached Camila's ears through the half-open kitchen door. Some people just don't know his place in the world, Victoria declared loudly, clearly referring to the incident. It's our responsibility to educate him. It was at that moment that Camila smiled for the first time that evening. A smile that contained decades of patience, years of planning, and the anticipatory satisfaction of someone about to completely rewrite the rules of the game. Because what Victoria Hartwell and her guests didn't know was that the intruder in the kitchen held a secret so powerful that it would turn the most important night of the New York elite into the most talked-about scandal of the decade. If you're enjoying this story of justice and want to find out how a simple humiliation turned into the most satisfying revenge anyone has ever witnessed, be sure to subscribe to the channel, because what happened when the truth was revealed changed the lives of everyone present in that mansion forever. In the kitchen. While Camila scrubbed the fine china plates that cost more than many Americans' monthly salary, Victoria Hartwell decided that a simple humiliation wasn't enough. You're washing too slowly, declared the organizer, entering the kitchen with 2 other guests to witness the spectacle. People like you should be grateful for any job opportunity, but it seems you can't even do that right. Robert Sterling, a real estate mogul known for her controversial opinions, laughed loudly. Victoria, you are very kind. In my company, someone like that wouldn't even make it past the interview. That's exactly why our country is the way it is, added Patricia Westfield, heiress to a pharmaceutical fortune. We give too many chances to those who don't deserve them. Camila continued washing, but his shoulders stiffened. Maria, the veteran employee, whispered, Don't listen to him, dear. They only do that because he feels superior. What Maria didn't know was that Camila Williams was no ordinary employee. A magna cum laude graduate of Harvard Business School, she had spent the last 12 years quietly building an empire in strategic consulting, helping companies navigate reputation crises and corporate restructurings. Her client list included some of the largest corporations in the country, but she always preferred to work behind the scenes. You know what irritates me the most? Continued Victoria, clearly enjoying the audience. It's these people who try to infiltrate our events, pretending to be someone they're not. As if we can't see through the facade. Camila smiled inwardly. If Victoria knew that the facade included an $80 million personal fortune and connections that could destroy reputations with a single phone call, she might think twice before continuing. Look at those hands, Patricia said, pointing at Camila as if she were an object on display. I bet you've never held anything more valuable than a plastic plate. Camila's hands, which Patricia was examining with contempt, had signed million-dollar consulting contracts, closed international deals, and ironically, saved the reputations of companies that were now represented at that very gala. You know what kind of people these are, Robert murmured, lowering his voice theatrically. Always trying to get ahead in life through shortcuts. Probably came here hoping to meet some rich man and settle down. Victoria laughed. As if any of us would give someone like that a second glance. It was at that moment that Camila decided to reveal just a small fragment of who she really was. She turned slowly, drying her hands with deliberate calm, and looked directly into Victoria's eyes. Interesting perspective, said she in a soft but authoritative voice that made everyone in the kitchen stop what they were doing. Especially considering that this gala is being held to raise funds for underprivileged children. I imagine they would be curious to know how donors really think about people who come from humble backgrounds. The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria blinked several times, clearly disconcerted by the sudden change in dynamics. Excuse me, stammered the organizer. I'm just observing the irony, Camila continued, her posture now upright and confident. You are here to help the less fortunate, but you cannot treat a person you believe to be in that category with dignity. Robert cleared his throat, uncomfortable. Well, that's completely different. Is it? Camila interrupted him gently. Because to me, it seems like exactly the same mentality that perpetuates the inequalities that are, in his words, supposedly his to combat. The tension in the kitchen was palpable. The other employees stopped working, sensing that something important was happening. Victoria, accustomed to being the most powerful person in any environment, clearly didn't know how to deal with someone who wasn't intimidated by his authority. You're being very bold for someone in your position, Victoria finally managed to say, her voice trembling slightly. Camila smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes and contained decades of experience in dealing with people just like Victoria. My position? What position would that be exactly? Well, Victoria hesitated, realizing she was about to say something that could sound even more prejudiced than he already had. I'm what? Camila asked softly, taking a step toward the group. At that moment, Maria looked at Camila with new admiration. In 20 years of working for the elite, she had never seen anyone confront people of this caliber with such elegance and authority. Victoria tried to regain control of the situation. He's washing dishes in his kitchen. That should give you some perspective on hierarchies. His kitchen, Camila repeated, raising an eyebrow. How interesting. And tell me, Victoria, do you know exactly who owns this mansion? Victoria's discomfort was now visible. Well, it's rented for the event, obviously. Obviously, Camila agreed, but his tone suggested there were layers of irony Victoria wasn't picking up on. What neither of them knew was that Camila had arrived at that mansion 3 hours earlier not as an intruder trying to infiltrate, but as someone who had every reason in the world to be there. And in 45 minutes, when his husband arrived from the emergency board meeting, the true hierarchy of that house would be revealed in a way that would forever change Victoria's perspective on who really held the power in that room. As Victoria tried to process the shift in dynamics, something in Camila's eyes made her realize he had made a terrible mistake, but he still couldn't pinpoint exactly what that mistake was. Victoria felt an inexplicable chill run down her spine when Camila questioned the ownership of the mansion. There was something about the way that woman spoke, a natural authority that didn't match her current position as an employee, that made her deeply uncomfortable. Obviously this mansion belongs to the Blackstones, Victoria said, trying to regain control. The most traditional family in Manhattan. They always lend the space for our charity galas. What Victoria didn't know was that Alexander Blackstone had married discreetly 2 years earlier, in an intimate ceremony on Martha's Vineyard, far from the spotlight of society. Her husband had expressly asked to keep a low profile, preferring to work behind the scenes on her own philanthropic initiatives. Interesting, Camila murmured, returning to drying the dishes with a calmness that now seemed almost theatrical. And tell me, when was the last time you two discussed the arrangements for this gala? Robert Sterling, growing increasingly irritated by what he perceived as insubordination, intervened abruptly. "Listen, we don't have to answer to him. You're here to work, not to ask questions." It was at that moment that something fundamentally changed in the atmosphere of the kitchen. Camila placed the plate she was drying on the counter with a deliberate movement and turned completely to face the elite trio surrounding her. "You're right," she said in a soft voice, but one charged with an energy that made all the employees stop what they were doing again. "I am here to work. But not in the way you imagine." Before anyone could respond, the sound of firm footsteps echoed down the hallway leading to the kitchen. Maria, who had worked in that house for 2 decades, immediately recognized the rhythm of those footsteps. "Mr. Blackstone is coming," she whispered to another employee, but loud enough for Camila to hear. Camila's eyes lit up. "Perfect. He's right on time." Victoria frowned, confused. "What do you mean, right time? You shouldn't even be here when he arrives. People like you." "People like me what, exactly?" Camila interrupted her, her voice now carrying an authority that made Victoria instinctively take a step back. The footsteps grew closer, and Camila began to head toward the kitchen door. Victoria tried to block her way. "You can't leave here. Not without finishing the job." "His job here," Camila said, delicately removing the apron he had been forced to wear, "is just beginning." Meanwhile, outside the kitchen, Alexander Blackstone was talking to his personal assistant, David, who had arrived with he. "The meeting ended earlier than expected," Alexander said, adjusting the cuffs of her shirt. "I hope Camila didn't get too bored on her own at the gala." David consulted his tablet. "Actually, sir, there was a minor incident. Security reported that a woman attempted to enter through the main entrance without a proper invitation and was directed to the service entrance." Alexander stopped abruptly. "A woman? What description?" "Black woman, around 30 years old, navy blue dress." Alexander's face hardened in a way David had rarely seen. "And where is this woman now?" "I believe the event organizer, Madam Hartwell, put her to work in the kitchen." For a moment, there was complete silence. Then Alexander closed his eyes and took a deep breath, like a man trying to control monumental anger. "David," he said in a dangerously calm voice, "I want you to document everything that happened tonight. Every person involved, every word spoken, every action taken. Everything." "Yes, sir. May I ask why?" Alexander was already walking toward the kitchen with increasingly rapid steps. "Because his wife has just been forced to wash dishes in his own home." In the kitchen, Victoria was still trying to process Camila's increasingly confident behavior when she heard Alexander's familiar voice echoing down the hallway. "Where is my wife?" The question resounded like thunder, and Victoria felt his stomach drop. She looked at Camila, then at Robert and Patricia, trying to understand why this question made her so nervous. "Her," Patricia repeated, confused. "But Alexander has never brought a wife to our events." That's when Camila smiled, a radiant smile that completely transformed her expression and revealed the powerful, confident woman she had always been, even under the guise of a humiliated employee. "Actually," she said, extending her right hand to show a diamond wedding ring she had kept discreetly hidden, "he did bring one. You just decided that I should be in the kitchen instead of the main hall." The ensuing silence was broken by the sound of Alexander's footsteps approaching rapidly, and Victoria finally understood the magnitude of the mistake she had made. But what none of his friends had yet known was that Camila had recorded every second of the humiliation on his cell phone, which had remained strategically positioned in his apron pocket. And in about 3 minutes, when the whole truth was revealed, those recordings would become the evidence that would turn the most prestigious night of the New York elite into the most devastating scandal high society had ever witnessed. "Alexander." Victoria's voice came out as a strangled whisper when the imposing figure of the mansion's owner appeared at the kitchen door. His eyes quickly scanned the scene, Camila with her apron in her hands, Robert and Patricia clearly uncomfortable, and her herself looking like a child caught doing something wrong. "Camila, my love," Alexander said, completely ignoring the presence of the others and walking directly toward her. "David told me what happened. Are you okay?" The silence in the kitchen was deafening. Victoria felt her legs tremble as reality finally hit her with full force. Robert Sterling swallowed hard, his face losing all color, while Patricia Westfield seemed to have shrunk inside her expensive dress. "I'm perfectly fine," Camila replied with a serenity that now made perfect sense. In fact, it was a very educational experience. Alexander embraced his wife tenderly, but his eyes were pure ice when they finally turned to the elite trio who had humiliated the woman he loved. "Victoria Hartwell," he said, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. "Madam Westfield. Mr. Sterling. How nice to meet you in my home." "Alexander, we didn't know," Victoria began to stammer, her hands shaking visibly. "Didn't know what, exactly?" Alexander interrupted. "That my wife is a person who deserves basic respect? Or did you just not know that she is his wife?" Robert tried a conciliatory approach, her previous arrogance completely evaporated. "Mr. Blackstone, there was a misunderstanding. If we had known." "If you had known, would you have acted differently?" Camila interjected softly. "That's exactly the problem, Robert. You only treat people with decency when you know they have power." It was at that moment that Alexander noticed Camila's cell phone discreetly positioned on the kitchen counter, still recording. A cold smile appeared on his lips. He called to his assistant, who had remained at the door. "Please come in and bring your tablet. We have some important calls to make." Victoria desperately tried to regain control of the situation. "Alexander, we can resolve this civilly. It was just a misunderstanding." "Civilly?" Alexander repeated, her voice rising slightly. "Like forcing my wife to wash dishes in our own home? Like calling her people like that? Like suggesting she was here to pick up some rich man?" Patricia's eyes widened. She hadn't realized that Camila had heard every cruel word they had said. "You recorded everything, didn't you?" Patricia whispered, horrified. Camila calmly held his cell phone. Every word. Every cruel laugh. Every racist comment disguised as social concern. David approached with the tablet, and Alexander began making calls while speaking loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Good evening, Janet. Yes, it's his. He needs you to immediately withdraw the Blackstone Foundation sponsorship of all events organized by Hartwell Events. Yes, permanently. No, it's not negotiable." Victoria felt the world collapse around her. The Blackstone Foundation was responsible for 60% of his annual contracts. Alexander continued, dialing another number. "Robert Sterling, correct?" "Yes, I need to inform you that all Sterling developers' contracts with Blackstone Group companies are effectively cancelled. I don't care about the penalties." Robert tried to protest, but Alexander was already on his third call. "Patricia, you work at Westfield Pharmaceuticals, don't you? What a coincidence. I just canceled the contract to supply medication to all of his private clinics." The three figures of the New York elite watched helplessly as his worlds collapsed in real time. But Alexander wasn't done yet. "Camila, could you show me those recordings?" he asked gently. She tapped her phone screen, and the cruel voices of Victoria, Robert, and Patricia echoed through the kitchen. Every prejudiced comment, every malicious laugh, every humiliation they had inflicted was documented in crystal-clear audio. "David, please make sure copies of these recordings are sent to the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, all major local television stations, and especially to Society Watch. He loves this kind of story about elite hypocrisy." "Alexander, please," Victoria begged, tears beginning to stream down her face. "This will ruin my life." "How did you try to ruin the dignity of her?" he replied coldly. "The difference is that she did nothing to deserve your treatment. You, on the other hand, chose every cruel word you said." Maria, the veteran employee who had worked at the mansion for 2 decades, watched everything with a mixture of shock and satisfaction. In all those years, she had never seen anyone defend the service workers the way Camila and Alexander were doing at that moment. "There's one last thing," Camila said, her voice maintaining that serenity that everyone now understood was not submission, but controlled power. "Victoria, you mentioned that people like me never get very far in life. I would like you to know that, in addition to being Alexander's wife, I'm also the CEO of Williams Strategic Consulting, which has just been hired by the New York City government to review all of the city's public event contracts." The last trace of color drained from Victoria's face. His contracts with the city will be the first to be re-evaluated. As the three perpetrators of the humiliation left the mansion in a state of complete shock, knowing that his reputations would be shattered by dawn, Camila finally allowed a genuine smile to appear on her face. Justice had been served, but more importantly, That night would prove to all of New York that a person's true character has nothing to do with the color of her skin, but with how he treats those he considers to be beneath him. The next morning, even before the sun had fully risen over Manhattan, the headlines were already dominating every newspaper and news site in the city. "The Silent Revenge: How New York's Elite Was Unmasked in a Single Night," read the New York Times. Camila's video recordings had been viewed more than 2 million times in the first 12 hours. Victoria Hartwell woke up to his phone ringing incessantly. Dozens of clients were canceling contracts, journalists were asking for statements, and even employees of her own company were publicly resigning. In 72 hours, Hartwell Events, a company that took 20 years to build, had lost 95% of its contracts. "Madam Hartwell," her assistant said on the phone, her voice trembling, "the Rockefeller Foundation has just confirmed that it will not be renewing our contract. And there's more, the Museum of Modern Art has also cancelled the Fall Gala." Victoria looked out the window of her Upper East Side apartment, knowing that soon she would not even be able to afford the rent there. The world she had built based on connections and prestige was collapsing like a house of cards. Robert Sterling was not faring any better. The recordings revealed not only his racist comments but also his discriminatory mindset in general, which led international partners to question all of his business deals. In 1 week, Sterling developers had lost contracts worth $120 million. "Dad, have you seen the news?" Her daughter had called him crying from London, where she was studying. "My college friends are sharing the video. I'm ashamed to use our last name." Patricia Westfield discovered that the business world has a long memory. In addition to cancelled contracts, internal investigations began to surface about discriminatory practices at her pharmaceutical company. Employees who had previously remained silent out of fear now felt encouraged to report years of microaggressions and institutionalized prejudice. Meanwhile, Camila and Alexander were receiving hundreds of messages of support every day. Black entrepreneurs from across the country sought her out for consulting, universities invited her to speak on corporate diversity, and her company, Williams Strategic Consulting, had to hire 10 new employees to keep up with demand. "You knew this was going to happen, didn't you?" Alexander asked during a quiet breakfast 3 weeks after the gala. Camila smiled. "Not exactly. I expected exposure, but not such a systematic change. People are really questioning structures that have been in place for decades." The impact had spread far beyond New York. The hashtag Camila Challenge went viral, with people across the country sharing her own experiences of discrimination in elite settings. Restaurants, clubs, and companies began reviewing their customer service and hiring policies. Maria, the veteran employee who had worked at the mansion for 2 decades, received an unexpected offer. Camila had created a training program for domestic service professionals, offering courses in administration and hospital management. "I never thought that at 60 I could still dream of a new career," Maria said during the graduation ceremony for the first group of participants. "But Madam Camila showed us that it's never too late to rebuild our dignity." 6 months later, Victoria tried to reinvent herself as a cultural sensitivity consultant for events, but no one took her conversion seriously. Robert Sterling sold the family business for a fraction of its real value and moved to a distant suburb where no one knew her story. Patricia faced labor lawsuits and had lost her seat on the board of the pharmaceutical company. During an interview on a national television program, Camila was asked if she felt any remorse for the consequences her actions had brought upon the 3 of them. "Remorse?" she repeated, considering the question carefully. "I feel compassion for the pain he is experiencing. But I cannot feel remorse for exposing attitudes that have caused pain to countless people over the years. What happened to him is a direct result of his own choices." The interviewer pressed, "But don't you think the punishment was disproportionate to the crime?" Camila leaned forward. "Let me tell you about disproportionate. It's when a black woman who graduated from Harvard is automatically directed to the service entrance. It's when people judge her worth based on the color of her skin before they even know his name. It's when workers are humiliated daily by people who consider themselves superior. That's disproportionate." Alexander, watching from the audience, smiled proudly. Her wife had become a powerful voice for change that the country had needed for decades. A year after the fateful gala, Camila was invited to give the keynote speech at Harvard Business School's graduation. Before an audience of future business leaders, she concluded with words that became a manifesto for a generation. "True power does not lie in humiliating those you consider inferior. True power lies in elevating those whom society tries to diminish. The best revenge against prejudice is not to destroy those who practice it. It is to build a world where such prejudice can no longer thrive. The audience rose to a standing ovation that lasted 5 minutes. Victoria, watching from his small rented apartment in Queens, turned off the television with tears in his eyes. He finally understood the magnitude of what he had lost that night. Not just contracts or money, but the opportunity to be part of something bigger than his own ego. 2 years later, when Camila was appointed to the Ford Foundation Board to lead racial equity initiatives, she received an unexpected letter. It was from Victoria, offering a sincere apology and asking if there was any way to repair the damage he had caused. Camila replied with a single sentence: "Reparation does not come through letters, but through actions that lift others up as he tried to tear me down." In the end, Camila Williams' story proved that the most powerful justice is not that which destroys the enemy, but that which builds a better world despite him. Her forced humiliation in a kitchen became the catalyst for social change that benefited thousands of people facing similar discrimination. And when asked about the legacy she would like to leave behind, Camila always replied that no one else should ever be forced to prove her dignity. That she should be recognized as an inalienable right of every human being. The best revenge, she discovered, was not to destroy those who had humiliated her. It was to use that humiliation as fuel to light a path that others could follow toward a more just future. If this story of resistance, dignity, and social transformation touched his heart, subscribe to the channel for more narratives that prove that sometimes his most difficult moments become the seeds of the most necessary changes.